Hey everyone, my name is Mike and this is
Jose.
Today we're going to do something a little bit lighter on the real estate side, which would be talking about some of the strangest questions that you've ever got as a broker or realtors and brokers get from buyers and sellers. So what can you think of any that like really stand out over your 20 years of experience in the real estate business?
After being in the business for a long time, you hear a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
Of course, a common one that we get often enough, but people think it's strange, but it is asked often is, has anybody died in this house? It's not a disclosure thing that we have to provide in real estate. If somebody asks if somebody's passed away in the home, what I usually tell somebody is like, just Google the address. If you Google the address, if there's ever been a situation here, you should be able to find like a news clipping or a news story about it. But that's not for me to discuss or disclose to anybody. Also, to follow up on that, is this house haunted?
So I ask you about the lighter side of real estate, and the first thing out of your mouth is, does someone die out in this house? That doesn't seem very light.
That's the number one most frequent asked question. Has anybody died in this house? And is it haunted?
Yes.
I'm not a Ghostbuster. I don't have the. I don't know. We're clueless if anybody's if the house is haunted or not, or stigmatized. That's not something that we disclose in our business or have to disclose. Although in some states, I think they have different rules where if it's a known thing that the house is haunted and it's been like recorded or people have talked about it or it's a known thing, in those situations you would tell the individual like, hey, this house has been known to have been a haunted house for a very long time.
It'd be hard to prove.
It's hard to prove. And,
do you believe in ghosts?
I don't believe in ghosts.
I don't believe in ghosts either. It wouldn't affect us. We just think it's probably wind outside or something
exactly,
like that.
Exactly. And we live in Florida too. So of course, Florida is very famous for sinkholes. So I get a lot of people that's, they're at the property and they're like, is there a sinkhole on the property? And I'm like, do you see any holes in the ground?
So we have ghosts and people dying in sinkholes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and also we're in Florida, so people ask, are there any alligators nearby?
Yes, that's a common one. Alligators and snakes.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, there's snakes. I mean, sure. I mean, if you live near a body of water, it's safe to say that there could possibly be an alligator nearby, but they're more scared of you than you're scared of them.
I've got that question quite often about the alligators, and I guess people that don't live around alligators have a fear of alligators, and they do look kind of, like intimidating.
Yeah.
However, if you actually look at the stats, I found this really interesting. If you look at the stats, cows kill more people every year than alligators. And is anyone afraid of cows? They're living next to a cow.
People aren't afraid of cows, but they could fall over on you if you're a cow tipper. Or they kick you, or something weird could happen. But
you put your shoulder into her and you push, and they fall over.
Alligators, as soon as they see you, they scurry away.
Yeah.
Like immediately, they're quick about it. But we live around the lakes here, and I've never seen an alligator in the lakes that are used up, like the usable lakes. But there are some places where people don't frequent or nobody swims in them, and that tends to be where they like to hang out, is where there are no people.
It's usually not an issue. I've actually done some kayaking in Wekiva Springs, and we're kayaking, and there was a pretty big alligator just sitting over to the side and just basking in the warm Florida weather, and didn't bother us at all.
Yeah, he probably just ate. So he's not going to bother you.
So, So we've got ghosts, people that die. Actually, the interesting story is the first open house I ever did when I started working. It was a house that someone had died in. It was a murder-suicide. So we're getting even worse away from that light side of real estate.
That's when you Google, and if you see tons of newspaper articles about that, then
But you couldn't tell when you're in there. But all the neighbors told us when we went and doing door knocking, because we also did door knocking at that specific time when I was first starting in real estate. So. And
I have that happen where you're an agent, you know nothing about the property. These things, there's certain things that don't have to be disclosed in real estate. Whether the house is haunted or or somebody died in it. It's not relevant. As far as
it's not a material defect.
Correct.
So going to the more serious side, it's we have to disclose material defects of the home and only the material defects.
And you have people that move in and then all of a sudden they're living there and everything's great, and the neighbor comes over and is like, yeah, it's a shame what happened here 5 years ago. And then they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you didn't know? 5 years ago, and then they start telling a story, and then the person, wigs out or something like that.
So I guess if you're someone looking to buy a house in Florida and watching this, you could always ask your realtor to do that research. It's just not something that's
Guys, everywhere across the United States, there's houses everywhere. You know, we're just following the guidelines and rules provided by the state of Florida of what we're required to do and have to do for the benefit of our customers. So nothing is being purposely hidden or not disclosed to you. Usually, it just never comes up because, you know, it's just not one of those things that we talk about. How about you? Anything weird on your end?
Well, what I did before we did this, I thought it'd be interesting to go and look on a Facebook forum, right?
Okay.
And they actually had this question, so I thought it would be a good thing. And what I can do is I can put my glasses on here, and I can go to that Facebook forum.
Okay, I'm
and
dying to
actually
get some of
tell
these.
you some of these and get your reaction to some of these. So here's the first one. This is a buyer asked, after we close, can we have the big bedroom? Will you ask the people living there to take the small bedroom?
Oh, so they thought they were purchasing a home, and then those people living in there were going to stay.
Stay, yeah.
Wow.
Must be first-time home buyers.
Yeah, must be. All right. Here's an interesting one. Has anyone ever cooked shellfish in the house?
They might have a shellfish allergy.
Exactly. They explained later that they had a...
I've actually had somebody ask me something similar, like, did the previous owner have any cats? Because they were deathly allergic to cats.
Yeah.
So they didn't even want to go and look or preview a home if there was cats anywhere in the premises.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've heard that before too. So this is one we won't get in Florida a lot, but it was pretty interesting. There's a couple of these about basements. Do you think this basement stays dry? I need some place to practice my witchcraft.
Hey, you know what? They have certain hobbies or religious, you know, viewpoints, if that's what they do. But dry?
Yeah, they wanted to keep the basement dry. So I've never really seen a wet basement.
I don't know.
Yeah. Can you help me find a wife?
That's a different type of business that we're not involved with.
Do you have a pen?
Yes, I do.
This was, and going away from the layer slide, this is actually asked to a woman, and I guess in real estate, this is an issue sometimes for women realtors that they get hit on by people, which is a shame.
All the time.
Yeah, it's quite a few of them in here. Here's the, are there ghosts here? So we got that one already. Here's one. Did the previous owner do anything kinky in this room?
I could actually, there's a new show on Netflix that's specifically about creating these types of rooms. So it's becoming more popular. So I'm sure that there's people that are like, hey, before I move into this house, like what happened in this bedroom that we're not privy to, we don't know. Yeah. I've actually had somebody ask me in the past, what was the race of the people who were selling the home? Of course, as real estate agents, we can't disclose information like that because of fair housing rules. So we simply just say we can't answer that question. It's illegal for us to talk about things like that, which people ask, which has no relevance to the home itself or the home's property value. Who knows? But it does come up, and everyone out there should know that as a real estate professional, we just can't discuss things like that.
That was actually one that was in here quite a bit. It was usually phrased in what sort of ethnicity is in the area and stuff like that, which is not where we're selling houses, and it's. Everything needs to be diverse.
Yeah.
So here's a legitimate one that'd be interesting to get your opinion on it. Can I move in before closing?
Yes and no. So some states, what they do is they do after the closing or escrow takes place, sometimes it's a 2-week period before the seller has to vacate the property. So for instance, the seller will close, they'll receive their funds, and there's usually like a 2-week layover period where the seller can gather belongings and make an extended exit. But here in the state of Florida, the way it works is on the day of closing, buyer takes possession and the seller vacates the property, unless they've made provisions in the contract that will allow a post-occupancy, which will allow the seller to stay in the property after closing, or a pre-occupancy, which will allow a buyer to take possession prior to the closing and funding of the property, which I urge people to stay away from pre-occupancy. Post-closing is, that's more acceptable, but the pre-occupancy could be dangerous, because if that buyer, for some reason their financing doesn't work out and they can't qualify for the purchase and close, well, they've already moved all their stuff in your house. They live in your house, and now they can't qualify for the purchase. What do you do?
Yeah.
Now you got to evict them before you put your house back on the market and try to find a viable buyer. Stay away from that.
I actually had Jasmine on my team call me about that she was helping a friend of mine sell a house, and they were supposed to close, and then the new buyers asked if they could come because the lender delayed closing, so we had to push closing a week.
Yeah.
And then the buyers didn't have anywhere to go, so we felt bad from it. And the seller, who are great people, the sellers are great people, they were considering it, and I just told Jasmine to advise them that that's really no benefit at all for them to allow them to come in. Yes, we like to do that, but if something happens, what happens if something happens to their valuables? Are they going to be who's responsible for the insurance on that?
Yeah,
if something breaks, who's responsible for that?
Yeah.
If their financing doesn't go through, what are they going to do in that situation? So I said that there's just no positives for the seller in that case. So I told her to talk to the sellers, explain all this, and it's always up to the seller what the seller wants to do.
Here's the thing, we live in Central Florida, and here in Central Florida we have tons of Airbnb short-term rentals where they're fully furnished, forks, silverware, knives, blenders, the whole thing. So what I recommend for customers to do that are in a bind like that, I recommend that they have all their belongings packed up, they get a portable on-delivery storage where they just drop a pod off in their driveway, they fill it up, and they have it stored in a temperature-controlled environment, and then their family will pack up and stay in a short-term rental for 2 weeks. It's like a mini vacation for them and their family for a couple of weeks until their new home is ready to be moved into and they get financing and it closes. Then they can move out of that short-term rental into their new home and have all of their worldly belongings delivered to the front doorstep of their new home. That's probably the best option. And we have that benefit here because there's so much short-term housing available here.
It's relatively easy here to find something. So here's one that's interesting. I want to get your reaction on this. Serious question. What way does the air flow in the house?
Yeah, I mean, see, so it just depends where people are from or their background or kind of how they grew up. Some people like to have doors and windows open at all times. And for some reason, some people want to catch a flow of air. Just like certain types of people, based on their religious beliefs or their backgrounds, they will come to me and they've asked me, hey, which way is the front door facing? For them, it's very important that they have certain that the door is facing in a certain direction because that's kind of the feng shui or it's just
the feng shui is actually another question on here, and it is important for some cultures where the door goes. Yeah. I'm not too sure. I've never heard of airflow before, or how we could actually fill.
Air is air. Yeah. I guess they don't want to use an AC, so they want to make sure they get optimum airflow through the house if they open the front windows and then the back window. Who knows?
If that's even a thing. So, how old are the wires in the walls?
Good question. That's actually a really good question because there's aluminum wiring, which is kind of not to code anymore. So a lot of that stuff has to be ripped out and new updated, insulated wiring has to go in through the house. So as a consumer, you might want to know, hey, am I going to have electrical issues down the road? Do I have to deal with this? Do I have to rewire my whole house? So yes, that's why we recommend that all buyers get a home inspection, because a home inspector will make sure that the home is to code and the electrical, plumbing, and roof and HVAC systems are running optimally. Yeah.
And here's a serious thing for people watching this. If someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer,
don't say.
The best thing to say is, I don't know, let me see if I can find out.
Exactly. Don't make an assumption.
Yeah, don't say, oh, well, this home was built in 2002, it's 2022, so the wires in the wall are 20 years old.
Or it should be, or...
if you don't know something, just say you don't know and you can find out, because how in the world will you know exactly what's behind the walls or when things were done, other than assuming it was done at the time of...
Don't make any assumptions. It will come back to bite you in the ass.
Here's a good one. Can I bring my dog back to the house to see if they like it?
Yeah, I've gotten that.
You've got that before?
A bunch. A lot of people, their pets are an extension of their family. You got to remember, some people, for whatever reasons, they chose not to have children or they can't have children, and their dogs are their children. It's their family. So when they make a big home decision, they want to make sure that their animal feels it. They're getting the feels when they walk in the door. So I've actually had people come back with their dogs, and usually dogs.
So how far, I hope I pronounce this right, I'm not into designer brands.
Yeah.
How far is Gucci? Is that right? Gucci?
Yeah, Gucci.
Okay, there you go.
That's interesting. Hopefully you were selling a property that was, over the $1 million price range. If somebody asked you a question like that, if their home depended on whether or not they were close to, quality shopping, it'd be different if you sold a $250,000 house and got that question.
Sometimes
the priorities.
The people,
I'm thinking of other priorities.
A lot of times people that are poor end up buying the Gucci stuff, and the people, I know I've dealt with some people that bought, yesterday I closed on a $2.5 million house, and I've closed on $6 million houses, and they're t-shirt jeans types of people, and they don't even wear watches. Yeah. So a lot of times it's about image more so than actual what they were. But to go along with that, here's a more important one. How far is the Taco Bell?
Hey, that's that's fourth meal. Like, I respect that question because you never know. They you know what? To be honest with you, they could be bartenders working all night. They don't get out till 3, 4 a.m. and they need a place to hit up and they want it to be close to home. Or maybe they've got a drinking problem and they want to be able to not have to get in a car and drive to Taco Hell when they could just go there, get their food, and wander back home. So I got to respect that.
Right. This is one I've been asked quite a few times. What kind of trees are these?
I mean, if they're asking what kind of trees they are, they're not botanists by any chance or, a horticulturalist. So, I mean, what does it really matter? If you don't know what it is, let's just call it a tree.
Yeah, people do ask that. So I've actually learned some of the basic trees in the area, but then if I don't know, I just say, I don't know. Yeah. But there are some trees that are pretty common, magnolias and crepe myrtles and things like that in the area. Let's see here. Someone on a brick house asks, is this brick?
No comment. No comment.
This one doesn't even make sense. There's no whale on the property? Question mark. There's no whale on the property.
Maybe if it's coastal.
Coastal, yeah.
Actually, speaking of homes and the home defects and stuff like that, we do have people here in Florida. I don't know about other parts of the country, which I'm sure could be the case, but I've had people ask me before, like, "Hey, is this drywall safe?" And what happened was during the housing boom back in 2004 through 2006, when they were building houses at an alarming rate, we ran into materials. So then, because we ran out of materials, builders were going overseas to get materials to build houses, and they got drywall from China. And of course, there's no regulations over there, So we were putting this drywall in houses, and people were moving in, living in them, and all of a sudden they started to have itchy eyes and some respiratory issues. And of course, that's defective drywall. So here in Florida, we recommend if anybody bought a house between 2003 and 2008, that you use a defective drywall rider to the contract to ensure that your buyer has the right to inspect the drywall to determine if it is hazardous. And if it is, they could cancel the contract and retain their deposit, or the seller can say, you know what, we'll go ahead and pay to have the drywall replaced in the home because we want to secure you as a buyer. So yeah, that's another question too, where if you're not familiar with it or you're just getting in the business today, you might not be familiar with what that's all about. So there's a little
cool
preview into that.
Another question that does get asked is how much money do you make?
Oh, well, that's interesting. I say to somebody, it just depends, because a customer might ask you that, or even another agent might ask you that that's getting into the business. I usually say it depends. It really does vary. We can make, $5,000 a year, or you can make, $1 million a year. It just depends how good you are at your job. So
we actually just did a video on that, so we'll put a link in the description on actually what do realtors make and how much realtors do make. So let's see here. We got, a male seller, so we're already good, we know where this is going, asked me to take off my shirt and show him the merchandise. Now this was actually a male realtor that got asked this as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, men are equally, harassed as much as women are. So also, let's talk about this a little bit too, because in our profession as real estate agents, remember guys, we're here to provide a service and sell houses. So just be careful on how you promote yourself and your services to the general public. If you're one of those agents and you're like, hey, look at this beautiful 4-bedroom, 3-bath home behind me. It's $450,000, it has a pool, except your camera is too busy focused on you and your body rather than the house behind you, it could send a mixed message. So if you don't want that type of attention, please focus on the inventory, focus on the information that we're providing to the clients.
So here's one, we've already touched on this one, but this is actually a realtor that I think we both know. At my open house yesterday, I'm in Florida, the potential buyer wants to know if the seller has ever seen snakes outside. It's highly likely, lady. Do you know where we are? It's not called the swamp for nothing.
I mean, guys, listen, let's just be honest. If there's snakes on a plane, there's definitely going to be snakes in the grass.
Yes. Yep, exactly. So a buyer's dad once asked me if I took a soil sample of the land that the house is on. Soil sample?
Yes.
I've never been asked that.
So what we do here in Florida is a lot of times if somebody purchases vacant land, they have a right to do a feasibility study. And a feasibility study is also, considered due diligence, whatever they need to do to determine that the dirt that they're buying is going to be feasible for their purchase. So we hire an environmental engineer to go out to the property, and what they do is they'll bore holes into the ground with this machine. It's kind of like a similar machine that you dig a well with. So they'll bore a hole, maybe 10 feet down into the ground, and they'll pull up the soil. And what they'll do is they'll look at that cylindrical piece of soil to determine the soil gradiency as it goes down. And then that will determine to an engineer whether or not they could put the tonnage or the weight or size of a home on the dirt with it being compact. Because sometimes it's muck or silt. And if that is the case, they have to bring in tons of sand that are equivalent to the weight of the home and put it on the dirt and leave it there for several months so it could compact the soil. And then they clear it and then they build a structure on it. Or you can insert pylons. So they put concrete pylons into the ground and they build a foundation on top of that that will hold the structure. So it is really important, especially if you're buying any land that's near a body of water or wetlands. You may want to seriously consider having an environmental engineer check out the soil.
All right. So Jose, is there a secret place or tunnel where I can hide some things that will not stink up the rest of the house?
Yeah, so I mean, there's one of two things. So there's people that are doing more nefarious type of things that they may not want. Now we're in Florida, and it's technically legal medically here in Florida, so people don't have to worry about hiding or having a grow house for marijuana. There are certain rules and stuff like that. But I've actually had somebody ask me something similar, okay. But that's because they wanted like a doomsday or a bomb prepping shelter or doomsday shelter. Uh-huh. So what they were doing is they were looking to see if they can, put a shipping crate. If they were able to dig a hole and put a shipping crate underneath or adjacent to the home to build like a little, doomsday shelter or something like that in case of a zombie apocalypse, which I thought was pretty interesting. And there's actually unique properties you could find on Zillow. Uh-huh. There's like a website, it's called Unique Properties of Zillow or something like that, where they show all these crazy properties that are offered for sale. And some of these have, extensive bomb shelters that are underneath the ground.
We actually, me and Haley, who's back there, we actually were in Tennessee a month or two ago, and we were in a compound that was about 26 acres, and we're filming it for our other YouTube channel. And they actually had a pretty extensive hideaway there. We couldn't film it; they didn't want us to film that. But yeah, it was pretty.
I wonder.
Oh, it was over 200 acres. Thank you, Haley.
So they could be doomsday preppers, and they probably have a legit situation going on there. Now, the reason they don't want people to see under there is because those people are very private about it. Yes. Because in case there is a doomsday or a zombie apocalypse, they just don't want people knowing the location or what type of setup they have down there, because it could be. Yeah,
they were cool of us filming the house, but then they actually told us a couple times, we're like, oh no, move from here, we can't film that. So, another one is, Jose, we have several pets buried in the yard. Do we need to disclose that or move them?
Yeah, so this is actually a real legitimate question, and I've been asked this before too. So some people say, we want to take our buried pets with us. And I'm like, that's entirely up to you. The land has to be level, and it has to look as if though you never dug a hole up in the first place. So you have to carefully remove the sod, take what you need out, put it back. It has to look like nothing was disturbed. I also have people ask me the same thing about plants. Remember, if it's a potted plant where you could pick up the pot and take it with you, you could take a potted plant. But I've had people ask me if they could take their plants that were growing in the ground with them, and the answer is no.
Not unless it's actually disclosed on the actual contract.
Yes, you can make a provision in the contract to say we're taking this, this, and this with us, and the buyer would have to agree to it. But if it's growing out of the ground, it has to be left with the property. If it's a potted plant, you can pick it up and take it with you. But yeah, the buried animal thing. Have you ever seen Pet Sematary?
Yeah, we watched it. It wasn't the greatest. It was an old Stephen King.
Yeah, but
If you ever watch movies from like 30 years ago and you really enjoyed them 30 years ago and you rewatch them now, you get really just, I watched The Never-Ending Story. I thought it was great and had all the kids there.
Did that dog have like psoriasis on his head or something?
Yeah, it was
What
something,
going on?
it was like pearls or something. I know, it was weird. Anyway, so here's one. When the owners move out, are they going to take their children with them?
Somebody just made that up. They've had to.
A friendly neighbor simply said hello and asked how we were doing as we walked across the front of the property. And then the client of this specific realtor said, "Are the neighbors always this nosy?"
Sometimes they are. You know, it just depends. We've had customers in the past that are looking to buy a home, and they specifically tell us they do not want to be part of an HOA. So sometimes when homes are built, they're part of a homeowners association, where they'll determine or they'll dictate to the homeowners, you know, how long they can leave their trash cans on the front curb, what color their house has to be painted. They can't have any commercial vehicles parked on the driveway. You know, the fence can only go so high or has to be made of certain material. And some people like that because it keeps uniformity and cleanliness to the neighborhood. And some people don't want anybody in their business or telling them what to do. So we sell them a property outside of the HOA. Do we have time for one more? You got anything else?
Okay, so let's see here. Let's find one. I had a buyer ask if they could buy the seller's dog.
Yeah, I mean, anything is technically for sale. So if the buyer is purchasing a home, I've actually been involved in a transaction where the person that bought the home asked the seller if he would give him the Porsche that was in the garage.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. A car, but because you can buy another car, but I don't know.
You can buy another dog.
I don't know. I don't think I would sell my dogs.
Well, you know, some people do. Some people. So a lot of times people do move from a house and then they move somewhere where pets aren't allowed or a certain size breed can't go, and it happens often, which is kind of sad because you see dogs having to go to these animal shelters and stuff like that. So it never hurts to ask, but 9 out of 10 times the answer is most likely going to be no.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen people before ask for random things that the owner owns as a personal possession, and they're like, "Hey, I want this as part of the deal," or "Would you be willing to accept X amount of extra money for this item?" Which is fine as long as it's agreed to. Now, a lot of times a lender that's doing financing for a loan doesn't want to see any additional items outside of the home itself put into the contract as being made part of the purchase, because the lender doesn't want to feel that they're providing money for the purchase of a home and a tangible asset that could be removed from the property once it's sold or has to be reclaimed in the future.
We get that a lot with the rentals here for the
all the
Airbnb,
furnishings,
with all the furnishings. You have to do that in a separate agreement.
It's a separate purchase on the side.
You do a separate purchase for $1 sometimes.
You give a bill of sale.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it. So let us know what you think.
Fun.
Yeah, let us know what you think about this format, and we can try to pick other topics and sort of search the real estate forums out there and try to find some interesting topics we can do. And there's some interesting questions here, some actually ones that actually came out to be very useful, I think, for realtors or even buyers or sellers that are thinking about buying out
Our
there.
job can be very fun at times too. It's very lighthearted. It's not so serious, even though we're dealing with serious and we're trading a valuable property and large assets and lots of money. Our job can be fun, and you know, we could joke about it from time to time. So very, very nice.
Awesome. All right. Take care, guys. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
See you next time.